So Trump was at the Black Journalist Convention yesterday, and it didn't even take 5 minutes for things to go nuclear. So let's play that clip, and I'll give my commentary on it.
Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and and I say this, historically, black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late. Just so we understand, I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working or something was
Mr. President,
wrong.
I would love if you can answer the question on your rhetoric and why you believe
I have
that
answered
black
the
voters
question.
should trust you with another 4
I have
years.
been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act?
And for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here.
So one of the things politicians like to do, and Trump is no different, is that when they're asked direct questions, they often can't answer them. So her question is, why should African Americans trust you given you said this, that, and the other? And, to be clear, I have said what that really is about is that most minorities that are in politics are part of the Democratic Party, right, of the opposing of the 2 major parties. So it makes sense that Trump would probably have a disproportionate amount of, I guess, nastier remarks about them, which, has more to do with just partisanship than, this person is this because of their ethnicity, because he's been very complimentary towards, Tim Scott, for example, even if that is the only black Republican senator, but I digress. So that's really the way he should have tried to frame it. But instead, he goes into this tangent about how it was so rude to start the convention off with asking a question that way, and I was told my opponent would be here, and you guys were late. It's all just ways of dodging, actually going into the specifics of, okay, I have had this stuff happen in the past, but that's behind us for this reason or the other reason. And even with the comment about the white supremacists he met with. I mean, a lot of these politicians, especially ones running for president, have associations that are not exactly up to the standard of what we would like. So, people will often mention that Biden was, I don't want to say mentored, but, was in the Senate and friendly towards Strom Thurmond and, Robert Byrd and whatnot. Just they'll use that as like a reference to his supposed problem with blacks. And it really just comes down to a lot of white politicians just happen to have associations with people that are not friendly or otherwise in favor of doing things towards blacks, even if they themselves may not be of the same caliber of antagonism. And that's as fair as I'll get for him after this. It's a Hail Mary. So he calls himself, and he said this stupid line before, the best president for blacks since Abraham Lincoln. And the journalist actually mentions LBJ and is like, Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And I've always convinced myself that Trump and his followers know very little about history. Like, yeah, they'll talk about the Democrats having the Klan in their background, for example, but in terms of just, it's really sad that I truly believe Trump either doesn't know what those two laws were or doesn't know what they did. When he invokes Lincoln, he misses out the part where after Lincoln fed the slaves the Emancipation Proclamation, there was a literal century of blacks being discriminated against, especially in the South, through other means. The difficulty of them being able to get jobs. You go into some bar and it says whites only. And the Civil Rights Act helped to destroy a lot of that discrimination that went on decade after decade after decade after decade. And I would argue that no president since Johnson has done anything of any substantialness for blacks. Now, when you talk to Trump supporters, the two things that they invoke the most often when it comes to what he has done for the black community are the First Step Act and him giving money to black colleges. And, my thing is, with regard to the First Step Act, it was a bare bones law, right, that was supposed to be followed up by something else, which Trump didn't in the 2 years of being president that he had after signing that law. And it also doesn't do anything for the blacks that have never been to prison. So it's like, okay, that's a slither of a minority group that you have assisted in this extremely minute way. But then when you go over to the black colleges, well, there's a lot of blacks who go to college and don't graduate because they can't afford it. So I'd say they would be very helped out if he supported something like free college, like loan debt forgiveness. I mean, it's really sad that these people, because my thing is this. I would say Trump hasn't done anything for blacks. Obama didn't do anything for blacks. Bush, Clinton, we can go down the list. But it's like Trump is running for president again, and he's hoping to trick African Americans into thinking, oh, this time I'm really going to assist you. When in this conversation, he didn't name any specifics of what he is going to do that will advance that community any further than he already didn't during his 4 years of not giving a damn about them. And just to go back to some actual specifics, when we're talking about stuff that a president could do for blacks that actually affects them, we have blacks being murdered across inner cities throughout America, whether you're talking about LA, New Orleans, Miami, Chicago especially. And Trump could easily say, look, these Democratic mayors that are in these cities oftentimes, right, that's the way it tends to be about around the voting base, are not doing anything to prevent this from happening. I need to get involved. We need to shut down these cities, give a curfew, mobilize the police force. This is an epidemic. They are slaughtering each other like animals. But you don't see that. What's even funnier is that Trump's running mate, and I only mention this because he's Trump's running mate, right, called the Democratic Party the party of childless cat ladies. One of the main Republican criticisms that tended to be associated with poor people, and black poor people in particular, was that we were welfare queens, right? You have these babies and then you get free money from the government and you get to just have children while you don't have to actually work. And I just find it so ironic that the talking point used to be, oh, they're having kids so they can get out of working, and now they're not having enough kids to where even their elected officials don't even have kids. We're all just these anti-children people that are trying to like make everyone as miserable as we are. When in actuality, birth rates across the U.S. are at a 30-year low. Some of that is due to economic reasons, the fact that more and more women just don't want children. Trust me, I know that I learned that the hard way. But I mentioned that just because it's another one of those like ironic things where something has shifted and they still like use the same rhetoric of before. Um, you could talk about the fact that blacks are disproportionately affected by heart disease and how Trump, his healthcare policy was repealing or taking less people off healthcare by getting rid of the individual mandate in Obamacare through his tax cut. And that also negatively impacts African Americans. But it's like what I'm more so trying to explain is that when it comes to specific things that are done for blacks and that were done for blacks under his tenure, it's extremely bare bones. It's stuff that affects like a minutia of a group, right? Like, oh, here for those of you that are in jail disproportionately. Oh, here's this one law that will, I guess, in some vague way assist you. Oh, for those of you that go to school, well, and are presumably going to school at these black colleges. Oh, here's more money for the schools to, I guess, do something with. Certainly not lower the tuition costs, but I digress. And it's like you sit here and you watch, again, blacks have children out of wedlock that are going to be more inclined to go to prison, just have like higher statistics of awful things happen to them, murdering each other in every inner city across the U.S., dropping out of college because they can't afford it, barely being able to get a job because a lot of these employers are just not willing to hire them, right? When the federal government could have a jobs program, and I mentioned that was like a problem I had where for 11 months I didn't have a job, even though I was like looking for one like crazy. And I just said, isn't it sad that like all these problems are just swirling around for blacks, and the closest thing we get to any salvation is a politician running every 4 years, vaguely talking about what they are going to do or have done or whatever, and knowing that no matter what rhetoric comes out of it, I love the black community. Every problem that exists will continue to stay, and with very little to no attention from these politicians who, again, only care about getting elected and then pretending we don't exist for the next damn near half a decade. And I know that Trump's fanboys are going to come around. Oh, he did so much for blacks. He didn't do anything. He did little to nothing, I should say that rather. It's another example of one of these white politicians getting 60, 70 million votes and coasting to sit in the Oval Office while we all expire and get worse off year after year. That's the whole trend. And even though blacks aren't voting for Democrats as much as they used to, right? They're not dumb. They're not going to go and vote for the Republicans, right? And any like giant number. Ooh, I might get 20% of the black votes. Imagine being excited about getting a fifth of a group to support you. But it's like he's getting that excited under the false pretense that this means the Democrats are like hemorrhaging black support and it's all going to eventually go to Republicans. It's not. It really, a lot of us are in tune to the fact that neither party is doing anything that can substantially that will substantially improve our lives. And really it's just a bunch of politicians and their followers trying to hype them up online. And the sad part is like, at least with people like Tim Scott and Byron Donalds and Larry Elder and all the rest of these, Trump bootlicking black conservatives, they at least get paid to do it. You have guys that for free go online, all these different comment sections. Trump had lowest black unemployment ever. It's like, okay, what's the point of having a job if you still can't take care of yourself? Most Americans, we've established, can't afford $1,000 emergency. Maybe if Trump supported raising the national minimum wage for the first time in over 14 years, we'd actually see a little bit of a difference, a little bit of a change. Nope. So he can go to these conventions and we can laugh at how dumb this stuff with him is, and it is dumb. But in all seriousness, you have an entire ethnic group that has been abandoned and ignored by both parties that are seeking its vote. And one of them is daring enough to actually have its nominee proclaim that he has done anything for them to where it's like impressive and he's done the most of any president in the last 100 years when he's really done the least of any president in the last 50 years.